tackle about the global and cultural issues brought by globalization and its effects to communication. So first is ethics and diversity in international communication. So media ethics is at the crossroad. Our primary challenge is moral relativism, and unless we solve it intellectually, the future of media ethics is limited. Ethical relativism is a long-standing issue, but in the first decade of 21st century, relativism has taken an comprehensiveness that threatens our conceptual progress in communication ethics. So, in ethics and diversity in international communication, it's a very common issue in global communication. Because for many centuries, people of the world were separated. They have different cultures and beliefs, establishing a nation of their own. It is why called a diversity, because all people in this world is unique of their own way. When the world is evolving, inventing new technologies, people around the world communicate effectively. But as civilization grows, the problem also rises and causes chaos in different aspects like its impact on cultural identity. When we say cultural identity, your identity as one of a particular group practicing your own culture like rituals, language, and many more. Because of influence of other century, you adopt it like your own, you respect it like your own culture. But some people never recognize others' belief, they judge according to what they say and never understand the differences of every people. It is when races came up. In communication, it's very important is you understand the people you are talking to. The language prevented you to communicate effectively. It is highly recognized not to use discriminative way of responding a person. Misconnection is a typical issue in international communication. Why? Because every verbal and non-verbal way of communication has different meaning throughout the world. So that's all. So we call this second one globalization culture pillar. Culture pillar rather. By this we mean that because of globalization, national traditions have a high risk of being lost. I learned the term deculturation when I was in high school. Have you ever heard of that? It's like, I don't know if you can call it a process, but I'll still use that term anyways. It's like the process of forgetting our own culture and adopting others. It's like losing your individualism and group identity. What causes that? Globalization, of course. Say, Kalesa, for example, it's like one of the traditional mode of transportation, but because of the emergence of cars, they're in danger of being lost, though there's still a few running in the countries. And another is during, say, special occasions like Christmas or birthdays, one traditional way of greeting during those occasions is by sending letters and greeting cards. But today, greetings are just a click away because of the social media. And as I think, globalization is one of the reasons behind the bankruptcy of some post offices and mail businesses because of social media, letters and mails are endangered because they're like on the verge of extinction because globalization brought in social media and it changed our way of communicating. So 21st century challenge in global communication. First is student issue in international communication. Students in 21st century have cell phones or smartphones, Facebook account, and many more. Well, actually, it's not a bad idea to have it because we are very independent in terms of communication. But it's also a source of false conception among students. In today's generation, a lot of students is a victim of cyberbullying, receiving threats, and prone on fake news. In globalization, it has a negative side, which is very disturbing
of that kind of situation. This issue never stopped because it is going up until now. Because of these various instruments like cell phones that are capable to manipulate and hurt the people using the means of communication. So the second one is using platform to communicate. In using platform to convey a message is way easier if you have a broader audience, where a platform is a way of promoting important message to your audiences, but in the case of this, we cannot see the person that we are communicating with. And that's where misunderstandings start because people have different views and understanding about the information conveyed.
The next one is the creation of global village. This means creating another universe, virtual universe where the whole world, like the entire world, is simplified into a single village. It's like you can talk to a French, to a Japanese, or anybody from around the world, having English as your lingua franca or the language that everybody speaks. So what's the issue? It's the isolation from this world, to the point where we are more concerned and we were more worried about our virtual friends rather than the people we interact with face to face every day. Because like what I've said earlier, globalization brought in social media, which changed our way of communicating.
So, communication challenge in multicultural organization. When people come together in one setting, like business, international school, co-workers from different groups, they have a diverse background, have different interpretation of language, signs, and other forms of communication. Lack of communication will prevent the people to communicate effectively, affecting the work of business. And they cannot apply an effective teamwork as a team. An issue regarding of multicultural organization in communication is an interaction bringing their own culture and they done things according to their practices.
Global mass communication. Well, this itself isn't the issue, but the things this brought is, while the spread of information is very promising, fake news is always in the picture. These news are mostly seen on social media, where obviously most, if not all people are usually at. And when this news reaches the people's eyes, the domino effect, it's like we know that news online spreads like as fast as the bullet train, right? So, but the problem isn't just the source for its reliability, but the person or the user as well, because in the mass world, not all are true and not everything are reliable. So, this is the last one. Political challenges. Like, if I ask a 70-year-old citizen from the remotest part of the country about federalism, or if he agrees to adopt federalism as the new type of government in the country, do you think he'll say yes or no? My question, my answer. So he probably would answer no, not because he dislikes federalism, but he doesn't know federalism at all. That hinders the communication there, because the world is, the country is globalized, but he's from the remotest, like pinakasulok na corner sa atuang country. So he's not updated about the new terms or the new mga terminologies of politics and stuff. So another example is, I have learned this during our Philippine politics during senior high school, that globalization threatens sovereignty, because it lessens the territorial boundaries. So it's like extraterrestrials, like foreign races are just like in and out of the country. They're living our country as if it's their own, to the point that take West Philippine Sea, for example. It's Philippine owned, but foreign fishermen made their living there. Though it's unlawful because it's part of the Philippine domain, but globalization is slowly erasing those boundaries. That's why it's just that easy for them to go fishing in our domain. So that's the end of our report. Thank you.
Right, good afternoon everyone. Our given task is to compare local communication, example with Filipino and global communication, or culture, like example with people from another country, or culture like South Koreans, Japanese, Taiwanese in Cebu, in a Venn diagram.
So, first, we define what is local communication. So, local communication is local communication is being able to communicate with the members of your local group or local area. So, it can either be in your local language, which is mother tongue, or a common language that you speak within your towns, o kanang inyong mga naandan nga mga lingwahe sa inyong certain area.
Yeah, yo. Global communication. Global communication is a term used to describe ways of connecting or relating, or connecting across geographical, social, and cultural divides. We prepare a short video clip for global communication. Just watch, guys.
Sa sumunod na gabi, ito pa rin ang naalala nilang Fumiya at Yam-Yam.
Umiyak kasi kuya.
Ano nangyari?
Naalala niyo yung dito kami kuya at yung ano.
Ba't kayo natatawa dalawa?
I remember yesterday, we are explaining about yesterday. He's so laughing. I remember about it, so I'm laughing now.
Yam-Yam.
Yan.
Baka pag pinigil mo yung tawa mo, may lumabas dyan.
Kuya kasi I am strongly
Why?
I'm burdened
Yeah.
by language. Maybe I'm changing of wind of change.
Hindi naman sinabi na wind of change.
Ano ba yan? Sasabi ko yan.
What is wind of change?
Bad air, bad air. Bad air, gas, gas. Carbon dioxide. Diba? Okay?
If I hold my lung,
Boys, lumabas na kayo ng confession room. Baka dyan pa kayo maglabas ng banner.
Bago ba yan si Pumia?
Yeah.
Ang lowest lang.
No.
Shift F5. Stop sa so yung sa pag-follow, shift F5. Shift F5.
Lang eh.
No, wala.
Oh, may na-learn. Sabi ko man eh.
Stop. Similarities and differences of local and global communication. So here is the Venn diagram. This is for local communication, for global communication, on the other side, and common among the two. Okay, ikaw din, stop na. For global communication, grammar, accent, and culture affects communication. Of course, para sa video kanina, ilahang mga huwag sila nagkasinaptanay. Kay lahat sila language, may lahat sila accent na dyan.
So, and sa local communication is equality between participants. So, for example, sa ato ang mga classmates, so we have kanang mag-share of idea. Then, kay local communication, so pareha mong language ng gamit, dali mo magkakuanay ka ng maka-share ba, maka-exchange of thoughts and ideas. So,
Yeah. Kung nasa yung topic, paantugan din sa laing paansan ang imong topic.
then, high emotional involvement. So, siyempre, kay kuan man, kanang mas nagka-share mo idea, mas dali sa inyo ma-relate ang abatin yung topic kung sa ang inyong ikuan.
Yeah. Sa global communication, inequality between participants, masabta ka. Kaya may istorya ka ng Amerikano, yung kanang di ka fluent mo English, di ba? Yango ka na. Kanang bisag wa ka kayo nasabtan mo, yes, no, ka na. Yeah, siya rin magsige istorya, di ba? Yes.
What's here to communicate and for local participants communicate and exchange ideas. And context is simple. So, ang mga words nga gigamit, so it's kanang understandable para sa inyong duha.
Yeah, sa global communication, the context is complex. Yeah, basta ka factor kay ang language, di ba? Kung di mo marag language, of course, maglisod mo sinabtanay. Labi na ako not knowledgeable or not enough, wala kay enough na knowledge sa atong language sa yeah, duration is short. Yeah, duration is short. Kaya kanang para lang pangutanon ka sa mariner. Kanang asa dapit ang sitio, di ba? Mayroon ra kang dito sir. Like kanang right turn, and that's all. Yeah, mabuo ra kaya kanang mga dialogue basta kanang lahat ng language. Yeah.
Communication barrier occurs. So, ano na, ang common sa aming kagumunan, misunderstanding sa
Yeah. Di ba sa both sa local kanang naga po yung mga barriers, di ba? Na mga misunderstanding. Magsamot na sa global. kung common sa ilang duha ang communication barrier. First, involvement of gestures. Di ba, bisan karang same of language, di ba, mas dali i-express ang iyong thoughts or ang iyong gustong i-convey ng message ay apat na kay gestures. Yeah.
Both blends interaction and exchange of information.
Of course, yeah, they both need exchange of information. Ang communication, ma-local or ma-global. That's all. Thanks for listening, guys.
So, good afternoon, guys. So, we're going to discuss about the positive and negative implications. So, what are the positive and negative implications of globalization and communication? So, before we discuss about the positive and negative effects of globalization through communications, we are going to define first what is globalization. So, first, talking about globalization, it describes countries and people on how they interact and integrate with one another. So, meaning, a thing can be globalized if a certain person move into action, another person, companies, government, and how the way they interact and cooperate with other people in other nations. So, how does globalization work?
Globalization is an economic concept that works by easing the movement of goods and people across borders. To ease the process, all investment, trade, and markets get integrated and barriers get minimized or eliminated to ensure different nations enjoy the flow of goods and services. How does actually globalization work? Globalization works into process with the other nation to investing na trade o mo market na mo intimate lang to the other one country, and also to ensure na happy sila sa ilang pag integrate nila sa ubang nation.
So here, we're going to talk about the positive and negative implications of globalization and communication. So first, positive implication of globalization and communication. So communication facilitates information among generations of people and promotes development of nations. So globalization through communication able nations or the people to be unified into single society, which help them function together. So once they function together, because they interact and integrate, they can develop, they can improve something about what they are going to talk about. Second is, communication promotes world peace. So why do you think in globalization, communication promotes world peace? So, it is understandable that communication is so essential because if you are going to interact with other nations and you are magka-understand mo sa each other or magkasinabot yun mo, meaning, dali agad ninyo magkasinabot o Next, last guy, communication promotes exchange of ideas and technology. So, there are different ways of interacting through technology, social media, sa. So, it promotes exchange of ideas and ideas because they can share their knowledge, we can share our knowledge, and they're about to express what are the things that kung saan na nila dito. O, bata.
And also the negative implication of globalization and communication. First, communication among the nations today has contributed to widespread of moral practices among nations. As we know, corruption is one defined mechanically. Economy people from other one may corrupt nila for their own personal gain. Kung countries nila sa globalization. Kedua, proper communication of politics, economics, and every language barrier and cause misunderstanding among nations and create havoc and inequity among the nations. And improper communication ay on politics, economics, and like one, lain-lain mo language like Filipino or Chinese, all yung one issues and disorder ay hindi nila magkatilabot o one, hindi nila nagtalay. And third, improper deliberation and breakdown in communication among nations was ought to result of war among nations. So, and Dave, what is your opinion on countries embracing one culture and language?
So, globalization and countries embracing one culture and language. So, you know that one of the most essential thing when talking about globalization is the language of communication, knowing that language are the essential medium in which the ability to communicate across culture. As ideas and beliefs are spread to more parts of the world through information technology and wider access, what has been traditionally defined as culture, meaning it begins to undergo change as newer understanding are integrated into the traditional conception. So this creates a new visions of what culture envelops. Communication develops knowledge of one several language which enables us to perceive new ideas, to think globally, and increase our understandings of ourselves. So, the most important concept here is that language are then the very lifeline of globalization, meaning without language, there would be no globalization, and vice versa, without globalization, there would be no growth of world of language. So, what are the status of Philippine English?
Globalization is the interaction and integration among nations which is driven by international trade. For the Philippines, globalization has been seen in the increase of literacy. The influence of the United States and ANCON led to high levels of English literacy in the Philippines after World War II. This is considered globalization because the influence of the United States created an increase of English literacy. It introduced a new culture to the Philippines. The increase in literacy allowed the Philippines to communicate and trade with more countries. Another example of globalization in the Philippines can be seen in the increase of industry. After the Philippines joined the WTO or World Trade Organization, there has been several opportunities for other countries on trade and trade for products in the Philippines. Those foreign companies have helped both the economy in an example of globalization because through foreign trade countries have helped both each other economies. The laws in
Good day, everyone. We're here to report about our test. So, we are gonna flight from the conversation of Sherry Turtle. This article is all about how people change the way they communicate through technology. today, because of we are living in a technological world, I mean universe, kay kuan ka. We have sacrificed conversation for mere connection. From the title itself, flight from conversation, it means conversation flew to connection. So, if we were to replace the title, flight from conversation, we could say the change of conversation to connection. Meaning, people, or meaning we, the way we communicate, the way we communicate, if we were, okay. Instead of using conversation, we are into making connections. People decades ago are using just conversation, while today, because of technology, we are into people choose technology in communication. So what is the difference between conversation and connection?
So, conversation refers to the communication in a face-to-face process. Since it is a face-to-face process, we are called upon to see things from another's point of view with our bare eyes and to able listen with our bare ears. Therefore, it can create a meaningful communication and can make real intimate relationship. According to the author, it provides real companion because it allows us to have empathetic understanding to one another. There is honesty you can see in sincereness of one another. So while in connection, it denotes a very different quality of social interactions in comparison to conversation, as it refers to the continuous streams of tidbits of information, such are those neatly packaged into hundreds of characters on Twitter. So what do you mean by neatly packaged? So well, according to Sherry Turkle, we want to present the self we want to be, she said. We get to edit, and that means we get to delete. And that means we get to retouch. So the face, the voice, the flesh, the body, not too little, not too much, just right. So meaning, we can customize our lives, our profiles, who and what we want to live, what we want to be, just by simply clicking in our tiny touch screens in our pockets. So think of it. As I share, therefore, I'll think of it. I share, therefore, I am. So meaning, what you share defines who you are. As of who you want it to be, you edit, shape you yourself, what you want, and share it. So technology can really customize ourselves. So according to Sherry Turtle, we think connection will make us feel less lonely, but it doesn't. So the opposite is true. Why? Because it provides an illusion of companion. Therefore, it makes us more lonely and fake because it can be edited. It looks like over time we stop sharing. We forget that there is a difference between conversation and connection.
So since our way in communicating is gradually changing to connection, there is a big possibility that we could forget to learn the skills of self-reflection until time will come that we will depend all in our little devices. And connecting and even forget how to have a conversation. There will be no more sense of empathy, and all we only have is the illusion of companion to robots. To prevent this to happen, the author teaches us some advice. According to her, we can make a room for conversation, like we can make our kitchen or dining area into a device-free zone, like that, and teach the children the value of conversation, how important conversation is. She said, I say, look up, look at one another, and let's start the conversation. Thank you.
So we 21st century individuals deals with the fact the internet involves the society more and more badly. Technology has changed the way to communicate within the way of relationship. However, it is fact that even people can maintain a long-distance relationship with the internet. Relationships through internet are not real, and therefore the non-verbal conversation is not real as well. Today, we are going to answer a given question about the article of Shared Circle and Flight from Conversation. But first, we need to show you a video for you to have a background for what we're going to talk. So, from the question, what is being alone together means? So, being alone together means we give more time using our gadgets instead of giving more time with families and friends. Have you ever noticed being alone and says, no one is listening to me? Sherry Turkle believes that this feeling helps in explaining why it is captivating to use social media such as Facebook, Twitter, and even chat booths or chat between you and a robot. It is one way of expressing ourselves without telling anyone in person. And there you can feel that there is someone who cares about or thinks about you, or should I say, there is someone who listens to you when others don't. So, technology offers an illusion of companionship. So, you feel that through technology, you feel, even when you're alone, you can feel that you have a companion. You feel that you're not alone. So, continue with the second question. So in the first question, so what does being alone together mean? So Shared Circle also quoted that we are together, but each of us is in our own bubble, fiercely connected to keyboards and tiny touch screens. As mentioned earlier, people are secluding themselves, able to keep comfortable distances from others while still being able to communicate via social media. Nowadays, everyone lives in his own bubble and is unable to start a good and useful conversation with eye contact. That means the good society dies more and more. So the second question is, what does the author suggest we do so we can make room for conversations? Zucker wants to say that everyone has to start conversations like they have been a long time ago. Not the conversations through the internet, more the conversations in person. It can also be seen as a call for our non-communicating society to wake up and change the current behaviors. Circle mostly discusses the decay of society if non-conversations are real. They are few positive and few negative aspects. With all the changes in technology and the growth of technology, the increase of connections has led to a loss in face-to-face conversation. Shuri Turkle concludes, so I say, look up, look at one another and let's start the conversation to reestablish the lost connection of conversation. Turkle wants to say that everyone has to start conversations like they have been a long time ago. Not the conversation through the internet, more the conversations in person. All in all, in the article Flight from Conversation by Shuri Turkle is a good article to start thinking about the decay of communicating society. And it can be seen as a wake-up call, which everybody seriously has to be thinking about. Thank you.
So, good afternoon, everyone. We're tasked to watch the video of David Crystal entitled, Will English Always Be a Global Language? So first, we identify those salient points raised in it. So it means the very important points. So first, English will be retained as global language as long as the nations, specifically the powerful nations today, continues to use English language. Hence, the desires of interaction of other nations is still there and retains that kind of power. Actually, we can use different language. We can use Martian or Latin if they take over and landed. If, like for example, the Spanish before, we're used to we adopt Spanish language because they landed and take over the place. So, like what David Crystal said, it could be. But as of now, English language is very powerful because of a powerful country which is the America. Then, as we observe around the globe, around all the nations, we're using English language to communicate, to interact, and to do business with them. So the second point we have is every nation uses different varieties of English. Depends on the influence of other places or nations. English is being used in a mixture of different varieties of English language. According to David Crystal, English of the future be some sort of amalgam of any sorts of English around the world. Bits of Indian English, bits of Australian English, American English, British English, and other variety of English. So, in the video, David Crystal emphasizes that actually he was asked by the interviewer if what will be the English language that we will be using in the future. Then David Crystal answered that actually English language have different varieties. Like for example, Filipino English, right? We speak Filipino English. We have grammars and accent, and other variety of English. So actually, we can speak other kind of varieties because we are influenced with different countries. Then next is the second question is, do you agree or disagree with both points?
So our answer is agree. Why? We agree not because English country, predominantly American country that still recognized as the most powerful nation in the world. Hence, the unity and the coherence of all country in the world will grow. For example, kung Chinese ang mga leaders Pilipinas, or mo take part sa tibok kalibutan, na ito kayo nga magkita mga dyan for how many years we've been using kanang one? We've been using English. For how many years na ang English na kuan? So, magdi tayo gamit. So, wala na go. So, despite the different varieties of English language, the courage of all people around the globe, Americans and other nationality desires to learn English language. According to David Crystal, people tend to learn English to do business, international conference, or simply interacting with foreign people. Diba? We tend to use magyud kanang in English, all the government kanang kada adlaw sa atong eskwela, sa atong pag-communicate sa atong maestra kay mura ganang para magdescribe na ita. For example, atong isulti ni Quran. Example na to atong asa day padong makdong na sir dito there right there na lagi. But simple English gyapon siya. But it's okay. In addition, there are many languages that we can learn and should be learned in order to improve our quality of life or just to influence other people. But English language is the most influential. It is a useful tool to improve the relationship of two or more countries that might be discussed in great successful. Kung talingon, Stacy, kuhan ito, karang kuhan si David Christos nga, pwede ko na ito maka-speak of kuhan, Martian, kung sila yung who knows? No, it depends on the people who, nag-lead sa ibang country. But, para na ako, lisod yun mawa ang English kay mo naman, how many sa practice sa tanan, Chinese, do English, Japanese, Korean, British, sa mga lain, French, German, they use English na sa ilang communication kay useful mo god din, kaya interactive siya ba? And mo siya. That's all. Thank you.
Our question is related to verse 6 earlier about how they discussed about will English always be global language. So let's watch it.
Click lang.
Asking about the future of language is that way madness lies. Who would have predicted 1,000 years ago that Latin would no longer be used in 1,000 years' time? By hardly anyone. I mean, obviously Latin is still used in certain circumstances, but it would not be the normal education to be fluent in Latin. If you'd said that 1,000 years ago, people would have said you were mad. So, in 1,000 years' time, will English still be a global language? We could all be speaking Martian by then, if they land and take over. You know, who knows what's going to happen? To ask about the future of language is to really ask about the future of society. And futurologists are just as unclear about what will happen eventually as I am about language. Because language, you see, is global for one reason only, and that is the power of the people who speak it. Power always drives language. There is no other reason to speak somebody else's language other than you want to improve the quality of life, or you want to influence them in some way, or whatever it might be. I mean, the tradition in English, of course, English became global for a whole variety of reasons. First of all, the power of the British Empire. Later, the power of American imperialism. Later, in the 17th century, the power of the Industrial Revolution, which meant that the language of science and technology became English, predominantly. In the 19th century, the power of money talks, and the two most productive nations of the world were Britain and America, both using English, so the language of international banking became the pound and the dollar, English once again. And then in the 20th century, cultural power, as you all know, because every aspect of culture you've encountered has some sort of history in the English language, like pop songs, for example, international advertising, air traffic control, the development of radio and television, the development of the internet. 100% English language medium when it started. But today, only a fraction of the internet is English. Internet has become multilingual. So, what's going to happen next? English will stay a global language as long as certain things happen. First of all, that the nations that are recognized as the most powerful nations in the world continue to use English, and all the other nations want to be like them, or want to interact with them, or want to sell things to them, and so on. And so English will stay like that for as long as those nations retain that kind of power. And we're talking mainly America here, aren't we? Predominantly. On the other hand, it doesn't take it isn't rocket science to think of scenarios where, for whatever reason, American power diminishes, the power of some other nations grows, and you get other parts of the world becoming more dominant. And, people say, about Chinese, well, one day maybe. At the moment, there's no sign of China wanting Chinese to be a global language, because they're all learning English in China, for the most part. But you can imagine a scenario where it was the other way around. You can imagine a scenario in Spanish. Spanish is the fastest growing language in the world at the moment, population-wise. Because of South America and Central America, and increasingly in North America, Spanish is becoming very widely used. You can imagine a scenario where one day we might all end up speaking Spanish. In another scenario, you can imagine one day we might all end up speaking Arabic, for reasons that are perfectly obvious for anybody who looks at the world. So all of these things could happen. At the moment, there's no sign of a diminution of English, the desire to learn English. The figures are going up and up and up every year.
Says that English is the global language and nowadays. And this is easy to see because English is the symbol of globalization, and globalization allows people for all around the world to hear English music, to see films is English, and communicating with other countries is English, and so on. So from the question, how would you evaluate David Crystal's talk? David Crystal discussed the concept of English as a global language and gave a brief history of how English is spread worldwide. He stated the main factors that led to the rise of English as a global language: the strength of the British Empire, American imperialism, the Industrial Revolution, and global trade. According to him, language is global because of one reason only, and that is the power of the people who speak it. Language can only achieve a global status if every country recognizes the role of language in the international community. The special role that English has in the international community has to be recognized not only by the countries that have English as a mother tongue, but also by all countries that have English speakers among their population. English have 1.5 billion speakers around the world. He says the number of speakers doesn't matter. And what is the more important is the influence of economic, technological, and cultural power.
Crystal provided the listeners with an excellent account of the growth of English as the global language. He believes that the future of English as a global language is stable in the short term as long as the world's most powerful nation continue to speak English, which is the US and the Britain. So he talked about accommodation also, the process by which speakers adjust their accent according to the people they're talking to and depending on where they are. So Crystal is hesitant to make any predictions past the short term, stating that the number of scenarios could take place which would knock off English of its throne. So English as a global language is a fascinating work, and he points out that it's crucial to take advantage of a global language and that countries that wanting to have a part in the linguistic future have to make language planning. So that's all. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. So our topic is all about Gordon Brown's video entitled "Wiring a Web for Global Good." So, first question is, on Gordon Brown's video, identify two salient points raised in it. So, para na mo, ang mga points nga narito is, what? Worldwide problems such as climate change, financial crisis, security, economy, etc. cannot be solved by one country alone. So ang ikaduha is na the internet, use the internet as a great tool to solve the problems worldwide and make our world better. So what are 2 points? The second question is, do you agree or disagree with both points I explained? So, I agree because for me, he is right. Worldwide problem can be solved when we are united. So, example of this is poverty. So, if we work together and help each other worldwide, so the poverty will be vanished. So, kung layo trabaho, taga-trabaho, na ba? Or tinabahay lang doon. So, sa second point niya is, but 21st century na so na internet. So, ang internet is a great tool to help solving the problems worldwide. So, para basta.
So, the next question, how would you evaluate Gordon's talk? Brown wants to explain the great accomplishments that can be had through the sharing of information through the web, and how it illuminates to people the interconnectedness of the earth. He hopes that the sharing of knowledge can help inspire solutions and urgency for the climate crisis. Through developing the ideas about global ethics, help one another and work together to deal the challenges of security, economic, poverty, and climate change. In the video, as we have seen in the first part of the video, Gordon Brown presents by showing everyone illustration about how kids in other countries are suffering and how they are mistreated. It is important that everyone, even the kids, have right to stand up and lead. Gordon's talk about how no one is showing concern for what is needed and how much people not taking the action for what is right or wrong. This is very interesting talks that we should care and have enough consciousness happening in our society and making the internet a very good tool to use for the better around the world. Also, Brown argued that the world's problem cannot be solved by one country alone. To solve the problem, everyone should learn to help another. So, just like a listing thing, so it cannot sweep by itself through one thing alone. So, it needs to be united. Then, we learn to help not just what we have I'm sorry, but we help because we know everything will be better. It doesn't matter what race you are and what region you are, but we are a union who are trying to help for a better global world. No one deserves to be visible the truths of the events that are occurring because of modern use of the internet. It's very fast to see everything that is global now. People are the most important in speaking their opinions to the public and sharing the ideas through the modern communication because it's the best way for the government to see. The next question is, Gordon Brown said that in the ancient Rome, when Cicero spoke, his audience would turn to each other and say about Cicero, great speech, and that in ancient Greece, when Demosthenes spoke, his audience didn't say great speech. Instead, said let's march. So, what do these two examples mean and which you prefer if you were a speaker? So the difference is that Cicero impressed himself upon the audience, while the Demosthenes impressed his subject upon them. Whether or not this comparison be a fair one, it at least presents an important truth. It is a compliment to the public speaker that the audience should discuss what he says rather than his manner of saying. Yet more complimentary that he should remember his arguments, that they should praise his story. The orator should seek to conceal himself behind subject.
So, if I were a speaker, I would prefer to be a speaker like Demosthenes, because as explained earlier, Cicero delivered the message very well to his audience, but Demosthenes had a very good message. So it's, for me, it's a compliment to the speaker if the audience get the message. For example, if ang imuhang topic is kanang about corruption. So kang si Zero kay murag ang para na sa ubang tao kay nindot nga speech, pero kang Demosthenes kay murag ang ilang ba kay murag muhimo na nga isla or mo lihok or kanang mo prevent galit sa awan. That's all. Thank you.
Good day, mate. I'm Joral.
I'm Gian.
And we are here to report of the scenario that would illustrate a cultural ignorance of an Australian in their greeting, good day, mate,
and the surname.
Describe a second scenario that would rectify it. So, first and foremost, let us first give notion about culture. Well, it is defined as a learned system of meanings that fosters a particular sense of shared identityhood and communityhood amongst group members. It consists of pattern of traditions, beliefs, values, norms, symbols, and even meanings, right? Thus, let us proceed to the first scenario.
So this is the first scenario. One day, a Japanese tourist arriving at an Australian airport. Then, an Australian friend who waited you and wanted to talk to you, and he greeted you in this way. Good day, mate. Since you did not able to catch the way the Australian pronounced the greeting because it's so fast, and you asked him, and did he say? And he said something about it. And that made that Australian guy offended since it was his natural way of saying, and it's a slang term to him. After that, the Australian friend called you by your first name, and you found it rude because as a Japanese, calling by your first name must be asked first to you. So with your culture, your surname must be used except if you give him the right to call you by your first name.
And that is the first scenario. Then the second scenario is to rectify the first scenario. In order to correct it, you must be able to know the different cultures of other countries so that your communication to them will not be affected anymore and misdirected also. So, of course, to rectify the first scenario here's what you're going to do.
So, as a tourist visiting Australia, you studied about the Australian slangs, their greetings, and their behaviors, and the way they talk to each other and to other people. After which, when the Australian friend of yours greeted you, then you obviously understand that you actually give response to his greeting. Also, to the Australian friend, he studied the culture of using surnames with honorifics to give respect to the talker, especially with the Japanese person. So as he talks to you, use your surname and give him the rights to call you by by your first name. And that's how your friendship to him works.
And that is the first scenario, and it was rectified to the second scenario. Now we also make a new scenario so that it will be very easy for you to understand what we're talking about. So the second scenario would it be, a Chinese businessman negotiates an Australian, which is also a businessman. They're contacting him by the use of medium like cell phone to communicate each other. Then the Chinese said,
"Good morning. Is this the beverage company? Can I talk to your manager?"
Then of course the officer replied, "Good day, speaking, am I talking to Mr. Lee?"
"What? Am I talking to Mr. Ford?"
"What? Did you call me Mr. Ford?" Well, that conversation is actually a good example on how the communication being affected. It is really obvious that Chinese businessman did not able to catch up the greetings coming from an Australian businessman because of his not too clear pronunciation of words, and he did not able to understand it directly. So likewise, the Australian businessman got offended when a Chinese businessman told him his surname because in Australia culture, first names are invariability used in all the business situations, and it would be very unusual to call a business contact by their short name. It should be on the first name. Then how are we going to rectify it? A Chinese businessman studying those cultures practiced by the houses before negotiating him so that he will understand and interpret the message as possible. So likewise, of course, the Australian businessman would not be able to allow himself to contact his business partner without knowing his cultures, his background, of course. Thus, throughout their conversation, the communication is smooth sailing, and there will be no discrepancies and misdirected to the conversation because they studied each culture by themselves before negotiating each other. So that's why it is very important to know the background of the people or the partner you want to talk, so that the other people will not be offended about what communication. Then, of course, the communication will be a smooth sailing, and you will understand each one of you. And that is our report this afternoon. Thank you.
So hello everyone, we are here to describe a scenario that will illustrate how a cultural ignorance in the use of a business card between Japanese and American affect communication. Describe a second scenario that illustrates the opposite.
So here's our scenario.
First scenario.
One day, an American businessman traveled to Tokyo to help his Business Insider launch its latest international edition. Their Japanese company partner arranged a packed day of press conferences and parties to celebrate the website's official launch. Unsurprisingly, he was asked to meet lots of important Japanese business people. They had been introduced to everyone, they bowed, exchanged names, and if the Japanese offers, they shook hands. The Japanese person took out a meticulously crafted business card and holds it out with both hands. He took the card, studied it with interest, and then began to apologize, for he had no business card to give them, for it isn't unusual in the US. Or United States. No relationships will be jeopardized if they fail to bring them. Smartphones have all access, but made business cards obsolete for millennials. Hence, he failed to bring them. Instead, he took out a pen and paper and begins to furiously scribble down his phone number, email address, name, and company position. After, he immediately put the card in his pocket, and for an unknown reason, the businessman he talked with just chuckled and smiled at him. After a few years,
He went back to Japan for the same purpose and realized how embarrassing his manner towards the Japanese people he interacted with. He was not aware of the etiquette in Japanese business rules that he would know, such as accepting the card with both hands and place it in the business card holder. If standing, if seated, it should be placed on the table for the duration of the meeting and then put it in the business card holder. Even if you are sitting far away from the person in the group, don't toss or push the card across the table. Get up and walk over to them. This time he was able to complete it appropriately.
So, as we all know, Japan is at its core a country of rituals, respect, and etiquette. Whenever Japanese people meet for the first time, particularly in a business setting, they present business cards in a custom known as Meishi Kokan. So from that scenario, there was a cultural ignorance happened on the use of business card between Japanese and the American businessman. First,
How he received the card. As the Japanese handed it face down to him, he didn't receive it with two hands, which was uses right response to the Japanese. So, para kanila disrespectful to ang pagbuhat niya kay as a Japanese man gid is ang paghandle or pag-receive atong card is face down to sa tuan.
Receive it with two hands and face down for a sign of respect. And the second one is he failed to bring his business card for exchange because through exchanging the business card, it is a way of communication by revealing one's true status. So because of that, for them sa American siya, it's unusual for them na mag-down business cards kay mobile phone may lang kuanon. So the third is
He immediately put the business card to the pocket which was disrespectful up towards him. See, please.
So lesson learned, guys. So kung magkuha na kayo ka ng business kuan, we should kung travel kayo na abroad, dapat mag-study ta o etiquette para ma-aware ta kung unsay mga do's and don'ts, kaya tingali mo na yung mga trigger o So that's all. Thank you.
So, good day everyone. We were assigned to the So, describe a scenario that would illustrate how a cultural ignorance of showing the sole of a shoe by crossing one's leg in Saudi Arabia affects communication. Describe a second scenario that illustrates the opposite. So, first scenario. In a country, there is an Arab girl who visited her friend. They planned to meet somewhere comfortable and fun. And they met each other. They talked some random things. While in the conversation, the girl crosses her leg and pointed the sole of the shoe to her friend unintentionally. The Arab noticed it. So yeah, and suddenly got angry. The latter doesn't know the reason, so she asked. The Arab explained that she did something that she doesn't like.
So in the first scenario, the Arabian woman was mad at the Filipino woman because the Filipino woman was showing her sole of a shoe by crossing one's leg to the Arabian woman. But the Filipino woman has no idea that it has a meaning to her Arabian friend. So in Arabia, displaying the soles of the shoe doesn't come across as a good gesture. One of the main reasons why such an action is perceived as an insult is because the shoe are often perceived as unclean, especially the soles. If you show them to Arabs, they will generally get offended. Arabians are known to care so much about their pride, dignity, and their origin. We all know that the lowest thing in our body is the shoes. Plus, it is the thing that is used to protect our feet from the dirt and dust. So they consider it as a slave for them. Showing them your shoe in their face means
You don't care for them and don't respect them too. As an Arab, you can use the shoe to offend someone else.
In our second scenario, a Filipino girl visited her friend in Saudi Arabia and planned to stroll somewhere else. While resting in a cafe, she avoided to cross her leg and point the sole of a shoe towards her friend or anybody else because she is already aware that doing such thing might let them feel the disrespectfulness.
So in the second scenario, the Filipino woman visited her friend in Saudi Arabia. But this time, she already know their culture and she already aware about the culture of the Arabian. That's what they all think.
Good afternoon, everyone. Our topic is to describe a scenario that would illustrate how a cultural ignorance on greeting a female business contact in Turkey affect communication. And describe a second scenario that illustrates the opposite. So this is the scenario 1.
So, at first, the Filipino man and the Turkish women have a meeting. So, a Filipino man is having a business meeting with a Turkish woman. He greeted the Turkish woman with a handshake, but the woman just gave him a slight bow or nod. So, ang babae hindi
People generally greet one another with a handshake. However, both Muslims may prefer not to touch people of the opposite gender. So,
Turkish people are Muslim. So,
yes.
For that meeting kay maka-affect siya sa pressure na hugog barrier kay ang Filipino Muslim sa Filipino kay handshake magyud ang first nila nga para mag-greet of people. So,
Turkish are allowed to touch the opposite gender. Example, close, very close. But however, wala nakibaw if that person is a religious person because Muslim do not dili pwede mo touch ang opposite gender. Scenario 2.
a Filipino man is having a business meeting with a Turkish woman. He greeted the Turkish woman with a good morning and a warm smile and just bow her head. So, ang katawan ng sa second scenario kay sa male Filipino are already aware nga dili pwede matouch ang any part sa body sa opposite sex o sa third is so that's why ni say na siya good morning
The next question is, how can one effectively and effectively communicate both in local and global contexts?
Simply so you must be culture sensitive so that you can not offend someone. So para maka-communicate ka effectively local man or sa ni global. So dapat culture sensitive ta kay bisag kita diri sa Pilipinas kay naabi tayo na culture every kana lugar siguro lain-lain na culture na ay about sa kuan. So dapat sensitive ta sa culture and wala to.
Sa Bulacan. Ari na nagani.
Oy, last na ay balik ako.
Ay,
Maria Sharon Lapis, and we are here to present the periods of media revolution and what is communication according to Clark Shirky's video, How Media Makes History. So, at the end of this presentation, you would know the different periods of media revolution based on Clark Shirky's video and what does it say about communication. Without further ado, let us start. Shirky explained that there are only 4 periods in the last 500 years where media has changed enough to qualify for the legal revolution. The first and foremost is the printing press. In the middle of 1400s, the invention of movable type jolted the whole of Europe into what Marshall McLuhan called the Gutenberg Galaxy. A printing press is a device for applying pressure to an inked surface resting upon a print medium, thereby transferring the ink. Next, a couple of 100 years ago, the rise of two-way communication, the telegraph and telephone, meant the arrival of conversational media and marked the second media revolution.
In 1972, the telegraph is invented. This allowed messages to be delivered over a long distance far faster than a rider and a horse could carry them. Although telegraph messages were short, they were a revolutionary way to convey news and information.
Next is the recorded media other than print.
Around 150 years ago, Shirky stated that the third media revolution, brought about by the introduction of recorded media other than print, was in full swing. What began with photographs quickly moved on to recorded sound and then film. So, this is the 20th century media. About a century ago, the fourth media revolution came to light. The harnessing of the electromagnetic spectrum to send sound and images through air, radio, and television spawned to the revolution. While the 20th mediascape is one of our parents know quite well, it is not reflective of contemporary reality. Media has been good at creating conversations, is no good at creating groups. So we can relate it to the phone. So media that has been good at creating groups is not good at creating conversations. So we can relate it on the radio and television.
So these are the 4 media revolutions. So apart from this, there is one innovation which is the social media. So this innovation, the internet, was not mentioned as one of the media revolution. The internet is majorly different from all of these other forms of communication and technology because usually within the past innovations, there is only one receiver of information, or there is one sender of information and one receiver. However, the internet provides for a means of communication in which there are multiple receivers and multiple senders of information. This period is the largest increase in expensive capability in human history. The internet is the first medium in history that has native support for groups and conversation at the same time, whereas the one-to-one pattern and television, radio, magazine, books gave us the one-to-one many pattern. The internet has given us the one-to-many pattern. For the first time, media is natively good at supporting these kinds of conversations. Media gets digitized. The internet became the motive carriage for all other media. media. Phone calls migrate to the internet. Magazines migrate to the internet. Members of the former audience can now also be producers and net consumers. Every time a new consumer joins this media landscape, a new producer joins as well, because the same equipment, phones, computers, let you consume and produce. Earlier, we were told that 20th century mediascape is one of our parents know quite well, and it is not reflective of contemporary reality. Therefore, we must question where the internet fits into this modern mediascape. Does it warrant the label revolution? Of the recent changes to our mediascape, Shirky said that revolutionary capacity is not a question of internet or no internet. Shirky explained that this is because we've had the internet in its public form for almost 20 years now. As such, the mere presence of the internet does not denote revolutionary potential. Instead, the capability for revolution is a matter of how social the media becomes. Thus, social media is the defining factor of the fifth media revolution. So what is communication according to Clark Shirky?
So we live in a world where media is global, social, and cheap. With the help of the internet, we are no longer disconnected with each other. As the capabilities of the internet expand, the internet is becoming the carrier of other social media outlets such as radio, television, music, and magazines. As we intuitively drawn to communicating with each other, social media tools provide new ways, new command for like-minded groups of people, and create new ways for all involved to collaborate. We, as users of social media, should be responsible despite how it changes the way we use to communicate.
In Clark Shirky's video, Shirky speaks about how social media is affecting people's everyday lives through the network in which has been created via the internet. The internet has given people opportunities to communicate in means that were never possible before, and most of these innovations have been happening within only the past few years. So that is all our report. Thank you and good afternoon.
Ang biyang kuhaan ka na, ang binyong ganda.